It's Q&A time. I'm going to go through and answer some of your questions that you've left on the videos. I want to do this more often, but I've been very, very busy traveling. If you haven't noticed the difference in all of my videos, the places that I'm at. So let's go and take a look. Someone says, this is a good question actually, even though it sounds rhetorical. How can I not want to remove suffering? Of course I want to remove it. Suffering is terrible. Isn't that the most natural and understandable desire? It's absolutely natural and understandable desire. Like, you're absolutely correct. So the reason that if you follow, the kind of sentiment of what I share, the desire to remove suffering is natural when we are yet to see what suffering is. So it's like the analogy of the snake and the rope. It's twilight, you're in India, and it looks like there's a snake on the road, and you can't really see it properly, but you see the outline. So you freak out, you get scared, you react, right? And all of a sudden you get a bit closer and you realize it's just a rope. So the question is, what was the suffering? Was the suffering was the snake wasn't really there, so the thing you were suffering over wasn't there. And the feeling that you had was created, and while you were experiencing it, it was real. But the question is, how real was it? Was it based on something real? No. So then, was it real? Well, yes, because you experienced it, but no, because it wasn't actually based on something real. So suffering is the same. We believe that the thing we're suffering from is there when it isn't. So we feel a feeling, and we think, I am suffering from this feeling, and I want to get rid of the feeling. That's what it all boils down to. But the feeling isn't the suffering. The resistance to the feeling is the suffering. So it's all completely illusory on an ultimate level, but I don't disregard that when you experience suffering, it feels real, you see? So we have to treat it with respect, but we have to then therefore change the way we relate to it, which means that we relate to it from a place of play, curiosity, and wonder, rather than, I don't want it, let me do something to get rid of it. I know, I'll follow this YouTube video tutorial that tells me how to get rid of my feelings. You see? You need to relate to it in a completely new way. So that's why the desire is natural. You do want to remove it because it doesn't feel good. However, the question is, why doesn't it feel good? What part of it do you want to get rid of that doesn't feel good? When you look close enough, and I've got plenty of videos on this, when you look close enough, the thing you think you want to get rid of isn't actually there. That's the beauty of this, you see? Thank you for the question. I just want to point out that in my experience, curiosity is often inaccessible when you are too dysregulated. Maybe there is a place for regulation and for true curiosity when it's available. Yeah, this is absolutely right. So you want to basically be, if you're not regulated, it's like another question. It's kind of like saying, I'm using an extreme example, but it's like, yeah, but Saja, I don't have time to worry about spiritual matters because my children are starving and I haven't eaten for a week and I don't get paid. It's like, well, you have other stuff to do then. You see what I mean? Like, there's other things to do that are more important, right? So it's like, we usually sometimes like don't realize the problem in the level that they're at. So I have a map, I have an octaves map, which explains the different facets of human experience, and there's different levels within each octave. So most people try to solve a fourth octave issue, which is like nervous system, well, a lot of depression and anxiety, with like seventh octave understanding of their absolute nature. And whereas it can help, it doesn't fully support it. And most people try to bash their head in the seventh octave, which is understanding the nature of my whole being and reality and that I'm infinite, to try and battle with some mental health issues that actually require fourth octave therapy, which is psychotherapy, anything, CBT, things like that. You don't need seventh octave stuff. You can do that as well, but like, you still need to do the fourth octave therapy, which is very important. So sometimes people try to like skip steps when I never see that as, you can skip steps only on the premise that you do both at the same time, but you can't just skip the step. It really is. It's really plain and simple, and it's become way more increasingly obvious to me after sitting with hundreds and hundreds of people now. It's just so obvious. We know it's like I knew it was obvious in my path, but I wasn't sure if that was the case for everyone. It's the case for everyone after a bit. Well, based on like a 100%. So far, maybe there'll be one person I meet next week that it isn't the case for, but so far it's 100% success rate with that idea. So yeah, it's very important. So yeah, just based, I think you're correct there when you say that. What is it which is living in an understanding? Sometimes people ask this question rhetorically as a form of like trying to convey a point, like so sometimes this could be a genuine question. This is important to note as well, guys. Like, this is a really good example of this type of question. So, like, in the early days of my community, back when I didn't set the right standards for the group, people would kind of like, someone would make a post, maybe asking for advice or support, or asking me for advice and support. And then people would comment like, who is the I that needs the support, or who is the I that requires this? And it's like, it's a way of bypassing the actual issue that's being had. So the typical question can be used, and I've definitely used it in certain moments that are necessary, like in very specific environments where the time is ripe for it. But oftentimes we use the same questions in completely unnecessary ways, as maybe sometimes I've seen people use it in like this kind of more passive aggressive, like, I caught you out. Look, I'm catching you out right now. I'm just giving you a reality check. Remember, there is no individual self. There is no understander. There is no one who needs the help. Remember that? See? Caught you. Like, people do it in that kind of way. And I've seen people do that so often. It's like this kind of like passive aggressive way. I'm not saying this guy's doing it right now, but it's very important to note that, because I've seen people do it so many times. In this instance, what is that which is living and understanding? The understanding is just lived. It's like, so I'll give you an example. In an experience of an enjoyment, right? If you're in a concert, you enjoy where the song kicks in. There's no enjoyer. There's an understanding being had, an experience being had. You have to like that particular style of music, which comes from conditioning, right? Like, if I went to like an Ariana Grande concert, like I wouldn't be raving at the drops in her music. I just not fond. But there's some people who will, right? So there's obviously an element of personal preference or personal conditioning that comes with the possibility to enjoy a particular experience. But the enjoyment is not from an individual. So there's just enjoyment. There's no enjoyer of the enjoyment, or there's no enjoyer of the concert. It's just pure enjoyment. In the Kashmir tradition, they call it the aesthetic rapture, which is basically any moment of complete dissolution, of separation, seemingly via an experience in the world. So it could be reading poetry, listening to music, eating chocolate cake, drinking tea, whatever it might be. And so that which is living the understanding is really the understanding being lived without an individual self. So thank you for the question, Marcus. So it's the source absolute experiencing itself through all of us in different ways. It's us experiencing infinite variations of us, in the same way that like light is experiencing infinite variations of its own color. And thank you for the comments, by the way, guys, because I'm prioritizing, like going through the questions. It looks like I'm just kind of skimming over it, but in my head, I'm like acknowledging. I just want to point that out. Fabulous videos. Thank you. Your premise that they can't prove consciousness exists is not true from their perspective. So your argument from that point onwards is based on this straw man. Science regards it as a side effect of the process of the brain. They regard it as that, but it's not proven to be that. They can't measure fear, but they can measure the biological changes we use to define fear. So in their regard, they see it as a chemical result of the brain, which is seen to stop when the body dies. Science comes from scio, meaning to know. So science, by its nature, uses the best models available to prove it's a work in progress. Your argument is purely speculative. So the purpose of this video isn't actually for scientists. So I don't care about what scientists really think. But I'm using it because I know a lot of people are conditioned by science, just like I was, conditioned by the ways of thinking. So this is not, I could not care less about being right. I really don't care. I don't care if I'm wrong. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. I know that based on my experience, this is what helped me awaken my intellect and put myself as the leading driving force of my own mind, and not letting other influences influence the way that I think. My way of thinking was liberated to thinking for myself. This is the point of that video. That's why I'm addressing science, because I know people are conditioned, just like I was, with scientific views. So I'm not talking to scientists, I'm talking to people who have listened and think very similarly to science, to then help reorganize their mind, to put them as the leading authority on their truth and not scientists. So yeah, that's my answer to that. Okay, another debate, dude. I'm not going through debates on this. I just don't care about being right. It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm happy. If you want to understand how I was happy, then you listen. If you don't, you just carry on. I would like to know what you think or feel is going on with the world right now. The end of human life is about to end, and like yourself, I have not been fully self-realized. I understand the truth about what you are saying about human nature, and yet I am bummed out and depressed about the current state of humanity as a whole. It makes me think suicidal thoughts. For the time being, I'm grateful that I live in the Kingdom of Morocco, where people are not being forced into mass homelessness and despair like everywhere else. It is as if the people here are unaware of what's happening, but for how long? So the state of the world, the way that I see it is that, you know, there's a coexisting paradigm. It's a coexisting paradigm. There's a paradigm of basically like all the darkness and all the light at the same time. So just like you, viewer, watching this right now, has a dark side, a part of yourself that you think are bad things that you've hidden because people have seen them before and rejected you, or you've seen them before and rejected yourself. There's like darkness within you, right? That doesn't necessarily have to be evil. It could just be tendencies that have come from trauma, right? Like maybe a little narcissistic tendencies, maybe tendencies to want to control, things like that. And you've noticed them, you go, oh, I don't like these, I don't want to control, I'm going to hide this from myself. So, and it could also be terrible things, like maybe you used to kill kittens or something, right? There's darkness in all of us. Darkness just means parts of ourselves that we don't want to see. And so within that happens on a relative level. On a global level, that also is the case. So there's like parts of our society that we do want to see: new buildings, new marriages, LGBTQ, and then there's like the dark stuff that we don't want to see. You see, like the mass amount of rape gangs in the UK that is taking place, and the courts letting them all free for some odd reason. So there's a lot of darkness, and there's worse than that, right? And we're not going to go into it in this video. It's worse than that. But the point I'm making is that the goal on an individual level is to be capable of seeing the darkness and processing the darkness, and that has to start with processing our own. So most people make the mistake of trying to solve and like fixate on the darkness in the world when they haven't fully seen the darkness within themselves. So if we really want to be a light in the world, you cannot start by trying to light up the darkness in the world when you haven't lit the darkness in yourself. So the main priority is to bring light to the darkness within ourselves, right? Our dependency for the world to need to be like a heaven on earth to then face the darkness in ourselves is not going to work. It'll never be the case. So we have to draw it back to what we are and understand the darkness that we're hiding from ourselves, and it'll massively help us understand the darkness that takes place in the world. Thank you for the question. Saja, I feel more fear and doubt now. How to living instead of dead. Could you make a video on that? I feel more fear and doubt instead of living. So this typically happens, Marilyn, when we are skipping a step. When I say skipping a step, like I mentioned earlier in the video, there are things in life that you can't skip out on. So I'll give you an example. For me in my life, I was taken 0 to 100 to, you could say, 0 to the 7th octave by the time I was 19 or 18 actually. But so what that meant was that I hadn't actually entered the 4th octave. This is why the 4th octave. I'm going to leave the link for the octaves in this video. I'll give you just a brief example. The 3rd octave is typically a teenager to young adult. And this is where creativity and building is birthed, and the reasoning and development of the intellect. In the 4th octave, it's where duality is birthed, and we have the experience of living independently, having the capacity to make money, support ourselves. Also, coincidingly with a load of other things, such as the development, the crystallization of knowledge and intellect. So like now I see the world the way it is. The world is this way. In the 3rd octave, it's still, the world is kind of this way, but I also see it that way. I'm still deciding. 4th is like, it's this way and it's not that way. And so in the 4th octave is where we develop and build and learn to build a fully autonomous experience. So for me, I went to the 7th octave before I'd even started the 4th, which was the understanding of the nature of reality, the understanding of that what I am is essentially infinite and I am everything and I am God. There's only one reality in essence. And so this had a lot of disorientation from that, because I thought that was somehow going to help me build a life for myself. No, it wasn't. And it made me bypass for a couple of years the possibility of building in the 4th octave, because I thought, well, the world is an illusion, right? The world isn't real. So it took away a lot of my inspiration and understanding of the world and the capacity to build and create in the world, until I realized that after the 7th octave goes back to the 1st, which is being, then to the 2nd, which is play, then to the 3rd, which is creativity, then to the 4th, which is manifestation and reality creation, and you go through them all again. So I realized I don't necessarily have to wait for that, but I should be prioritizing right now the 4th octave. 7th octave realization of the nature of reality will not help you build a life in the 4th octave. I mean, it will support that, but you still have to do the 4th octave things. If you have a 4th octave problem, you have to have a 4th octave solution. 7th octave solutions will not help you, will not do the thing you need on the 4th octave, although it will massively support it. For example, knowing you're infinite is going to help you when you're creating your reality, because you know that you don't have any limitations, so it's easier to face the limitations that you do believe you currently have and work through them in a more efficient way. But it itself won't change anything for you, you see? So if you feel more fear and doubt in living, it's because there are layers of your life that you still need to address. Just this understanding of being infinite does not help you undress all those other layers. You have to go and learn them all, learn what it means to play, learn what it means to create, understand how to therefore then create your reality, which is the 4th octave, What is it you want from life? What is it you want to build? Are you happy in your current circumstance? If you're not, you should do something to change it. It's a limited idea to think we shouldn't do things to change our reality because we should be unconditionally happy. Absolutely not. We all have desires that are a part of our soul's, you could say, our soul's purpose. I don't really think of it in that way, but let's just say, just as an example, it's like we have things that in the highest amount of freedom our soul will naturally express. Like you could be a dancer, a singer, you could be a painter, you could be a farmer, you could be a mother, or whatever it might be. There are things that you are really, really, really good and capable of doing that you will naturally do when you're fully free. So if you notice you're not doing those things and that you're hiding from yourself, you can see that there's still more stuff to do. You see? Any desires that you have that you don't do because you fear the consequence, that you feel that you don't believe you deserve, is a key indicator of a desire that you naturally, it would be an expression of your freedom if you had unraveled all those other layers too. So I'd recommend going back to the drawing board and not having this I know syndrome and just experiencing what it is like to be with these more simple things. Like, I don't know where money's coming next month, or I don't know what job I want, or I don't know how I want to live, but I do know I want to live here. I do know I want to live this way. I do know I want to live this type of life, but I'm not living it. Why is that? You see, it would only be because of the separate self that is inhibiting you from moving because you believe you might fail, because there's a load of other limiting beliefs and desires that are coming under the radar that still have to be looked at. So in freedom, you'll have everything you want and you will respect everyone and everything for having what they want. Until that happens, there's still stuff to look at, which we should be prioritizing, which I think might be what's happening here, Marilyn. So thank you for the comment. Not sure what you say about autism. Some of them are really clear about the self and ego weirdness. So the octave, when you see the octave stuff, the octave is a map of, I'm still trying to understand exactly what the map is describing, but it's almost like a map of experience, the development of experience. What does that mean? It means like there are developmental stages of experience that coincide and cooperate to maximize the potential of celebration in the human experience. So life is literally designed to be celebrated. We're here to celebrate existence itself. So like when we think of let's think of when we're born as the first octave, which is where we experience being, but we don't have any objective experience. Then we develop language. The first word is symbolic of the first transition from the first to the second, which is where we start to learn to talk. We start to pinpoint thoughts and perceptions together. It's also where we learn to play. It's also where we learn to experience freedom, but we don't quite know that freedom yet. The third octave is where we start to develop creativity more vividly. We start to develop reason. I won't do this because of that. Then the late stages of the third octave is typically when we're about 18 years old, where we are going to university, we're leaving home for the first time, we're tasting what it's like to live without the parents. And then we enter the fourth octave where we finally get a job, we sustain ourselves. Fourth octave is about duality, worldview is crystallized. When the worldview is crystallized, we have views of the world. This is where typically religions take place. This is where therapy takes place. This is where we start to realize that we're suffering. When we realize that we're suffering, we realize we want to get rid of it. We start removing suffering at this stage. This is typically where meditation practices begin. Yoga, things like that. The later stages of the fourth are when we have a strong desire for enlightenment and liberation. And that's what brings us to the fifth octave, which is then where grace comes. We have our first glimpse of reality, unknowing, unbeknownst to our own efforts. And then we enter the fifth octave. The fifth octave is filled with insight and suffering. It's filled with seeking and it's filled with discovering. It's where most of the spiritual paradigm is. We've had our first glimpse of reality and now we want to make it our lived experience. And what happens is we kind of oscillate back and forth to freedom and suffering and freedom and suffering, which then means that we must make this transition to the sixth octave, which is to be curious and to live in not knowing. The fifth octave says, I don't want to not know because I do know because I had my experience, and now I just need to get back there. That goes back to state seeking, that goes back to removing suffering. When we keep doing that, that then requires us to need to move forward then, which is to get used to not knowing. In not knowing, we find the adventure mode. You hopefully have seen me make videos on this. If you haven't, guys, just search Sergeant Fendel adventure mode. You'll find those videos. And this is the sixth octave. Sixth octave is when we learn to play again. It's like the second octave, but with spiritual understanding involved. We learn to explore experience for the sake of play, wonder, and fun, which then naturally will take us to the seventh octave, which is a genuine grounded realization of the nature of our being. We see there that what our being is absolutely everything. There's nothing not included. And the fifth octave is actually a realization of the seventh, but with the conditioning of the fourth. The seventh realization, the true seventh realization, is the realization of the seventh without the conditioning of the fourth, which means that we're no longer playing games with ourselves. We no longer think we know. We're just open to infinite possibilities, purely present, purely in love. Moving from the seventh is where we integrate all of the octaves. We go back to the first, our experience of being. The exit of the seventh octave, or the transition, is the the complete surrender of individual identity, which is our willingness to die. So it's basically the experience of our death is the next experience of our birth. So just like the first octave was literally the experience of our birth into this world, we didn't have that, but symbolically. The seventh octave requires our death, and the eighth octave is our birth, which is actually the first octave. It goes in a spiral, right? Spiral dynamic. Which then helps us fully live in the world and integrate it with compassion. Compassion is fully actualized, which is the highest form of intelligence. The highest form of intelligence allows us to live in all octaves at once, interchangeably, without holding on to any identity and rigidity. Most people are fixated on the fifth, and they're fixated on the third, or they're fixated on the fourth. This allows us to move in and out of them seamlessly. And that's how we learn to celebrate life fully. So that's the octaves map. I can leave a link for that, like I mentioned in the description. You can check it out. Interesting. Can't remove suffering. What's the point of being here? See, a comment like this tells me that there was a trigger when I said that, which then made you not listen to the next thing that I said, which is very common. But because I've already answered this in this video, I'm not going to answer this again, but just to emphasize the point there, a lot of the times we feel triggered when we hear certain things that contradict an identity that we've been upholding. So if you've been upholding the identity of, I'm going to continue to remove my suffering, it will then trigger a reaction which will cause some form of conflict or dissociation within us. So it's important to notice things like that. Hi, Saja. How can we deal with the fear of losing our loved ones and never seeing them again? These thoughts are very heavy and sad. When someone dies, when we believe we're separate from them, it does hurt a lot more, but it doesn't stop the grief. The grief is an overwhelming amount of gratitude. So when you feel like this, Frank, and you imagine losing your loved ones, I used to do this all the time. I lost my mum when I was 10, and I lost my nan, who was like my second mum, because my mum was always working, didn't give me any attention. I lost them in the same week. I didn't even cry when my nan died because I was so shocked because my mum died. And I couldn't grieve until about 5 years later with my nan. Like, in other words, like, I couldn't feel for 5 years. I couldn't feel it for 5 years. Until one night in my bed, I just burst out crying, and it all just kind of came pouring out of me. Grief is not grief itself is easy to go through, but processing it isn't simple. What happens is when we grieve, what you're experiencing right then, the thoughts that feel heavy and sad, it's heavy and sad. But when someone does die, there's a different experience that takes place. you feel it depends also how they die. You know, my mum died of terminal cancer. My nan died quite suddenly. My sister died of terminal cancer. So it was kind of gradual and expected. My best friend died of cancer, but it was very sudden for me, at least. I didn't even realize he was going to die. I thought he was going to be fine. I thought it was just one of them cases where, everyone gets cancer, but everyone lives with it. It was a weird belief to have. So when my best friend was dying, it was very sudden. I didn't expect him to die. I didn't think he could die. And then he did. And that was very shocking for me. But the purpose of this, what I'm sharing, is that when I felt it, and I just cried and cried. It was just overwhelming gratitude for our friendship, and this is really what grief is about. It's about an overwhelming gratitude for our friendship with the person. And so, you don't really, grief doesn't feel bad. It's when we resist the grief that feels bad. So when you're imagining someone dying, what you're doing is also kind of like resisting it. And the resistance to it when they haven't actually died is going to be a lot stronger when you keep imagining it. And so I remember the thought that I had of my sister dying. Like, I remember, so after my mum died, when I was about 18, I would like imagine like, oh, who would be like the worst person to die like now? It would be like my girlfriend at the time. It'd be like my sister, and it'd be my best friend. And I thought, oh my God, that's absolutely horrible. I remember thinking I didn't even want to go there. I was just like, oh my God, they'll die one day. I was like, this is terrible. I don't want them to die. And then lo and behold, they both died. Not long after, maybe 6 years after, 5 or 6 years after, or maybe 7 years after. And it was a lot easier, if I'm honest, than when I imagined it at the time. Now, obviously, massive events have changed for me that stage, the whole spiritual path and the awakening process that I was on. But it didn't stop me grieving. It just stopped me resisting the grief, and it stopped me suffering the consequences of it. And so when I went through the experience, what I realized very vividly is that, well, I was like thinking, then what is, if I'm not suffering, what is this? Like, what is this experience? I realized it's just gratitude. It's just an overwhelming amount of gratitude that is very hard to process, because it's like when you share gratitude, you have to receive. So gratitude, you can only really express gratitude when you've received something, right? You don't just say thank you to someone who didn't give you anything, right? So I realized, wow, so when I'm resisting my grief, it's because I'm not receiving the life they've given me. I'm not receiving the gifts they've given me. I'm like resisting it. It's like I don't believe I deserved it, or that I deserved it. But when I'm grieving and I'm just fully in it, I'm just receiving and grateful and grateful and grateful. And I keep on receiving and receiving all the energy that they've given me. So when I think about grieving, I think about being given a gift. I think I'm being given a gift, and I'm receiving and receiving and receiving, and it just doesn't stop. And I keep receiving until I'm done, and I don't mind if I'm done or not. I could be grieving for the rest of my life. It doesn't make a difference, because I'm just given more gifts for the rest of my life. So this process of grief really is the process of receiving the gifts of life that they've given you. So when it feels heavy or sad, it's because you're still not yet ready to receive it, because it's still being lived. So I would recommend, based on your question, if this is how you feel now, I would start getting accustomed to being very, very grateful for their life before they have to die. That's the best way. Be very, very grateful and appreciative for their life and all the gifts they've given you before they have to die. Then when they do die, it'll be a lot easier to process, I assure you that. When I realized this when my sister was dying, when I found out she was actually going to die. That's when I realized, like, all the times where I wasn't grateful, where we'd argued, and I just processed it, and I just forgive myself for not showing her all the love I should have showed her for the other times in my life. All the times where I could have cried with her, all the times where I could have felt with her, but I couldn't because I was numb. I just forgive myself, and I allowed myself the freedom to receive the gift of the life that she's given. And then when she did die, I fully lived everything she taught me. I paid her the due diligence of her gift by living my life to the highest extent. The same with my best friend Jack. Every teaching that he taught me, everything that he shared, I repay. I don't have to repay him. You see what I mean? This isn't a transactional thing. I don't want you to think it that way. It's about truly appreciating someone's life. It's about truly, truly appreciating it. And my way of appreciating it is to live everything they taught me, is to live everything that they shared with me, is to talk about them in moments like this, you know? So that's what I'd say to that. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was helpful for everyone else. Thank you for watching this video. We'll do some more, so make sure you leave your questions in the comments of this video. They will come to this feed like you've seen here today, and we'll go through the questions and move from there. I have a community where you can ask me any questions as often as you like. It's free, and the link for that is in the description. So have an amazing day, everyone. See you soon.